Well, hello again from here at Whitley Park. Now, I've just been inside the building there talking to Eddie Howe ahead of the FA Cup game down in Birmingham. One or two big updates to bring you in terms of fitness news and little hints at team selection. But first of all, I want to talk about the mindset going into this FA Cup fourth round tie, be that amongst supporters, players, management, whatever it may be. Now, I was coming here this morning and we sat there amongst ourselves talking beforehand, and there's that narrative that emerges, and I dare say it has amongst one or two of you, that will it be the worst thing in the world if Newcastle don't make it past Birmingham? Bearing in mind we are expecting many changes. They've got that busy schedule to come leading up to the Carabao Cup final. Well, you can make the argument for it, and that goes along the lines of there's been important FA Cup defeats before. That sounds like a really strange thing to say, but Eddie Howe has revisited that defeat by Cambridge in his first season and spoken about how, on reflection, it probably wasn't the worst thing, given they then did survive and then built on that in the summer, and then the following year they were a Champions League team in the Champions League season. Even when they qualified, they went out to Sheffield Wednesday in the January. On reflection, was that the worst thing? Probably not. So there is the argument to be made, but I wouldn't make it, and this is why. Last night I was on social media and the goal popped up, a Newcastle goal, and it was Sean Longstaff taking a penalty at Nottingham Forest in the Carabao Cup earlier this season, the penalty shootout. I'd forgotten that even existed, but wow, how important was that now on reflection when you think of everything that is to come for Newcastle over the next month, the build-up to that Carabao Cup final against Liverpool. Wednesday night wouldn't have happened without that goal, without that penalty shootout. Bearing in mind, Newcastle in that game were actually trailing at the start of the shootout when Joe Linton missed. You then flip that, and everything that subsequently follows leads to what there is now. And couldn't that be also true of the FA Cup? Yes, Birmingham away in the fourth round. You might think it isn't a massively inconvenient stage to exit. Then they get a favourable draw in the fifth round, and all of a sudden they've got a FA Cup quarter-final to look forward to. And I don't think Newcastle are in a position now, in a place where they can be writing off competitions. Not that they will internally, absolutely not. The team sheet tomorrow might look like that, but I know for certain there is a mindset and a determination to make it through because of what we saw on Wednesday night, because of that excitement, that occasion, everything that was with it. It was magnificent. Everybody is still talking about it. My desk in London want to ask me about it. I've had messages from all over the place saying, send me videos, tell me what it was like. The interaction from you guys and beyond has been tremendous on the back of that. And you only get nights like that if you negotiate the rounds and the nights like tomorrow night. Now, there will be lots of changes. I don't think Eddie's got much choice in that. He's got to play 2 or 3 from Wednesday night, but it will only be 2 or 3. We'd expect to see Nick Pope come back in goal. You can probably pick the team yourself, but the big call he's got to make is in attack, because there isn't really much what lies beneath. Those 3 are going week on week now after Miguel Almiron is gone. Harvey Barnes is injured. Joe Linton is still out, of course. But Callum Wilson, there was a little hint in the press conference there that Wilson, it might just be better that he starts tomorrow night. We saw when he came back last time in November, December, he had the 4 substitute appearances, and there's a theory that it didn't actually do him any good just coming on for 10, 15 minutes here and there, and his body broke down again. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Callum Wilson start tomorrow, and that might be in a new look system or formation with Will Osula up top. Another argument I would make for staying in these cups and giving them absolutely everything is because of those forward players who Eddie probably will rest tomorrow night. Now, there's no guarantee that the situation Newcastle find themselves in now, with a squad who, for me, has 4 or 5 world-class players, Guimaraes, Tonali, Isaac, Gordon, there's others as well, not far behind that, like Botman, Joe Linton when he's at his very best as well. They might not have that squad beyond this season. They might not have these opportunities, and given it has been 70 years without a trophy, you cannot just write off one of those competitions, even if they are in the final of the other one. And that is why I've changed my mind, even in the course of a few hours. I admit I came here this morning, I was probably thinking, you know, along the lines of what I said at the top of the video there, might not be the worst thing if they go out tomorrow night. Given the benefits, you could argue, to the league campaign in a really small squad. It is a small squad. We will see that by way of the selection down at St Andrews. I don't agree with that now. I think go for it. And even with the changes tomorrow, they still should have enough quality in there to go and beat Birmingham. Now, I mentioned Callum Wilson there, and another subject I want to explore is the golden oldies. We saw Kieran Trippier come back in on Wednesday night. And by the way, thank you for all the comments beneath my video after the victory over Arsenal, the majority of which said, where was Kieran Trippier on the podium? We should have given him some stars. Well, I did make special mention of Trippier after I gave the 1, 2, 3, and perhaps hands up, on reflection, I was wrong. Trippier should have been on there, but I didn't do down his performance at all. I actually spoke for longer about Trippier in the video than any of the other three. I gave the stars 2. He was tremendous. He was magnificent. Everything we know he can be, he showed in that game. The talking throughout, getting in the faces of Arsenal, getting in the minds of Arsenal. I think at one point he was spotted saying these guys don't want it. That certainly planted a seed, and it looked as if they didn't want it. It's the impact he has, not just on the opposition in that regard, but also on his own team as well. And that's what Eddie's just spoken about at length with us inside, because don't forget, there is that interest there from Galatasaray. My understanding is that Galatasaray had some soft inquiries through intermediaries rebuffed last weekend, but their transfer window doesn't shut until February the 11th. So I asked Eddie Howe, is Kieran Trippier off limits this window? He said yes, for him, absolutely. He called him unique. And he spoke of that old school leadership and that impact he has on those around him. Not just that, his own skill set within him, that set piece delivery, that retention of the ball. Where others in that position, I still think Tino Livramento has got a fair way to go before he gets to the level of Kieran Trippier. And my follow-up question to Eddie was, well, if we've seen that on Wednesday night, and we've had that snapshot of that big game player and how good he can be, doesn't that lend itself to just keeping him in the team? Again, he talks about that Callum Wilson scenario as well. When they come in and when they come out, it's not necessarily the best thing for him. If Trippier's fit now, and I don't necessarily mean with regards to tomorrow, but for the other games leading up to the final, Manchester City next week and beyond that, play him, put him in the team, let him find that level of consistency, because when he is at that level, wow, I'm on record saying this, of that January 3 windows ago, has the club ever had a better January when you look at the business they did? Guimaraes, Trippier, Dan Burn, wow, what an argument that is as to who's the best out of all of them. But could Kieran Trippier, for me, and this isn't just what he's done on the pitch, it was everything about the message he sent coming back from Atletico Madrid into a team that was fighting relegation. I honestly don't think there's been a more important signing out of all those the club have made post-Saudi takeover. Go back beyond that. Even, is Kieran Trippier the most important Newcastle signing of the last 20 years? I'm prepared to sit down and make that argument. Maybe a video for another day. We'll go and revisit all of them. There's been some good ones. There's been some bad ones too. But I would play Trippier. I would keep him in the team. And on the subject of those golden oldies, Wilson coming back, it was only a few minutes the other night. And Eddie's spoken about this again this morning. But he said that in the January window, if they'd gone out and tried to buy a striker at Callum Wilson's level, it would have been impossible. Now, the big if with that is keeping Wilson fit. Now, that's all well and good if by choosing not to bring in that extra reinforcement, Wilson's there and he's the player we know he can be. But if he's not, that's when you look at it and think, has there been too many windows now in a row when they've just held on to that hope and that belief that Wilson will be okay? This is probably for Eddie and the club and Wilson, this period now, well, it's last chance saloon in terms of proving that. But what a chance it is. You guys know what I think of Callum Wilson. I thought Newcastle was signing a very good player. I didn't realise they were signing an excellent player. Everything he did during that period under Steve Bruce and Mike Ashley before Newcastle is what it is today. Never underestimate that. Between himself and Alan Saint-Maximin, they kept Newcastle in the Premier League, which then, of course, enabled that Saudi takeover. So don't ever play down the impact and the influence of Callum Wilson on this football club, even though the last year and a half has been of great frustration. I understand that, but there's no one more frustrated than Callum himself. Now, he's done things differently this time. He believes his body is in a better place. It is more robust. It will be able to see itself through between now and the end of the season. But it doesn't even really have to be that. It's the next 4 weeks in that lead up to the Carabao Cup final that's going to make all the difference. And if Wilson has had a run whereby there aren't no setbacks and he's in that squad for the Carabao Cup final against Liverpool, Newcastle have an infinitely better chance of winning it, given that quality he provides from the bench, that option for Eddie Howe that he just doesn't have right now. So Wilson is one who can have a massive impact between now and the end of the season. Kieran Trippier can do too. Like I said, those golden oldies. And Nick Pope, we'll see him come back in goal tomorrow. Bearing in mind, Newcastle lost the last Carabao Cup final 2 years ago, not at Wembley on the day. They lost it when Nick Pope was sent off against Liverpool a few weeks previous and he was suspended. Nick Pope coming back. And Martin Dubravka, for me right now, still is that number one. He probably will return against Manchester City, but just having that option of Pope there, if anything were to happen to Dubravka, be that with fitness or form, Nick Pope is another one. An incredible goalkeeper. The impact, we talk about the impact Wilson and Trippier have had on the club. Nick Pope too. So having those three now back available in a good place, I think that is so significant and potentially hugely impactful on what happens between Newcastle now and the end of the season. Now, in the short term, what will happen down at St Andrews tomorrow? We're expecting to see those changes. Emil Kraft, Tino Livramento, Matt Targett, that new look midfield of Sean Longstaff, Lewis Miley, Joe Willock will come in, Will Sula, probably Callum Wilson. One or two from Wednesday night will have to go again, but I still think they'll have enough to do it. Don't forget as well, Birmingham, we talk about Newcastle's distraction of the EFL Cup. Birmingham are going for the EFL trophy and promotion from League One as well. So perhaps they might make changes too. And I think Newcastle still should come away with victory. And as I touched on at the start of the video, I do think that's massively important just for maintaining that mindset, that winning culture. You can't, if you're an elite team, you can't be going into any game thinking it's perhaps not the worst thing in the world if you lose. I don't think they're thinking that inside. I'm just tackling that argument that maybe does exist. Perhaps it doesn't come back below the line, tell me I'm talking rubbish. Don't ever be afraid to do that. Some of you certainly aren't. So yeah, guys, where are you at? I think they'll go there tomorrow in the will win. I won't be there. I've got prior commitments this weekend with my family up in the northeast, but I will be back next week when again it rolls on, looking ahead to that Man City game. And I've taken the full video to get to this point. The injury update on Sven Botman. I revealed this in my Newcastle confidential column yesterday. Botman has avoided serious injury. When he went off on Wednesday night, we didn't necessarily know there was a problem. Eddie then said to us in the press conference afterwards, there was a knee issue, and immediately you think, wow, the ACL and the problems he's had. But as I revealed in the column yesterday, that's okay. Avoided serious injury, won't play this weekend, but should be okay for Manchester City down the line. Speaking of the confidential column, go in there, I'll put the link below the line, absolutely jam-packed with information and news around the Carabao Cup final. Trafalgar Square's closed, where's the alternative? The trains, what's happening there? A big update from Network Rail and LNER. What else? Which end are Newcastle going to be in? What's the ticket allocation? All of that is in there, loads to get through, but we've got the next 4 weeks to look forward to the Carabao Cup final. For now, it's the FA Cup, and for me, what is still a hugely important game. Okay guys, if you are going, have a safe journey, enjoy it, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.